politics, faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
Have you ever realized just how much your thinking impacts the way you feel? Your thinking impacts the way you feel. You know, you've thought about that ex, and all of a sudden your heart starts to race and you have to gasp for your breath because, you know, maybe they did bad things to you, or maybe you didn't really want the relationship to end, but it did. Maybe you think about a past boss or a parent, and suddenly anxiety overwhelms your body, your blood pressure races, your temperature goes up, your hands go clammy, and your body feels physically, biologically, like you're living in a trauma. But you may be sitting on the beach. Everything is fine, but because your mind is going in the direction of the trauma, your body feels like the trauma. Now, you may not believe it until you sit in a horror film, or you sit in a rom-com in the movie theater, or you sit in one of those movies that's designed to be a little bit titillating. And you realize that something's going on with your physical body just by watching this movie. Yep, if you don't control your thoughts, someone else will. Leaders should know that if you don't control your thoughts, someone else will. Today I want to talk about how that impact on your thinking impacts your physical, biological health. In this episode of Leading Leaders.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and you've probably heard me mention before from the book Success Principles by Jack Canfield. He tells a story about a guy who gets locked in a train on Thanksgiving. Well, the night before Thanksgiving. And when the family can't find him, they all come back looking for him, and they find him in this train car. It's a freezer car. It's designed to transport frozen turkeys across the country, and they still remain frozen. So it has to be designed to be airtight and well insulated, and the temperature inside a regulated frosty temperature. And when they find the man, almost 24 hours later, his body shows the signs of having been frozen to death and asphyxiated. No surprise, he's in a freezer car, right? No, the real surprise was when they realized that the hood vent was open and the car had no power, which means both it was the ambient temperature of outside and it was not airtight. There was no reason for him to freeze to death or asphyxiate inside this car. So why did he? Well, there's evidence, sufficient evidence, that your body responds to the thoughts in your head. You can control your own heart rate. We see it in the movies all the time, right? People who are up against a lie detector test, or they're being held hostage and they have to control their thoughts. I've had conversation with a man who actually was in the Hanoi Hilton as a prisoner of war for a long period of time, 6.5 years, I believe it was. And he talks about how the various things that are said and done in that camp are done to break down your emotional will and destroy your body. Well, what is done to your mind is done to your body, sometimes with no physical contact at all. If you've ever lived in an abusive relationship where the emotional stress and strain was all verbal and not physical, you know what I'm talking about. If you've lived the kind of life where you constantly criticize, ridicule, and run down your own self-esteem, you know what I'm talking about. The body will respond to those things, and it's not always a good response. It's pretty fascinating, though, how the human body relates to human thought. It's also fascinating that you have control of your own thoughts for the most part. It's when you surrender those thoughts, like in the movie theater, like to some audio programming, binaural beats, things of that nature. It's when you surrender those thoughts that you can be heavily influenced from outside. Music does it. Ambient sounds do it. White noise does it. All of those have the ability to control or at least impact your heart rate, your blood pressure, and the other chemicals moving around in your body. You think I'm kidding? Go back and look at some of the old studies on how certain heavy beat, high-paced music, classic rock, certain forms of rap, actually change your heart rate in your body, change your blood pressure, cause your muscles to move. There was a great movie, trying to remember the name of it. It was a kids' animated movie. The Floops were the invaders, and the little girl starts playing music. And she said, shake your groove thing. And he said, I don't want my thing shaking. But as the music played, his body began to respond to the music. He said, what is this that's happening to me? She said, it's called dance. He said, I don't want to dance. But he couldn't control the way his body responded to the music. And eventually it made him happy, and he danced. And there you are, right? All we've got to do is play the right music, and everybody will dance. No, it doesn't quite work that way. But it is amazing that our health response is a genetic code. How we respond to things sometimes is as deep as our DNA. Some call it epigenetic. Epigenetic meaning the code in your body is already switched in that direction, but you don't necessarily have to turn it on. Maybe your family leans toward a propensity to have hyperthyroidism or to have some other kind of disease related to the thyroid, or maybe your family has a history of genetics that would look like cancer or diabetes or struggles with weight or blindness or glaucoma. Those are genetic. But sometimes those genetic things, they stay dormant. I mean, they're in the family, but not everybody in the family suffers with them. How is that the case? Well, usually that's the case, what Dr. Caroline Leaf would call epigenetic, meaning the body has the propensity for that thing, but the mind has not yet surrendered to it. Just because your family has a history of diabetes doesn't mean you have to choose to have a sweet tooth. Meaning your body's probably not going to have the same load of sugar versus insulin and not react the same way. I spoke just the other day about what they call diabetes type 3, which is the onset of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and other mentally related mental illnesses or incapacities in the brain, such as memory and bodily functions and things of that nature, that are caused by sugar. It's a different relationship than diabetes and insulin resistance in the muscle fiber and the impact that it has in things like neuropathy and the circulation in your feet. But when you put all those things together, you have to ask the question, how much of that was naturally in the body and how much of it came by the habits, which are created by the thoughts that you think. You think a thing, then you do a thing, and it becomes a habit of a thing, and now it changes your entire life. I've been reading recently, and I just got it. It's brand new. You can tell it's barely been touched. It's called The Silva Mind Control. This book is actually a reprint of a very old book. But I was skimming through it just the other day, getting ready to do my research in it. And I came across this very fascinating paragraph. This is the Silva Mind Control. I'm going to read a little clip from page 67. Quote, in his Boston speech, Dr. Simonton quoted the president of the American Cancer Society, Eugene Pendergrass, who said in 1959, quote, there's some evidence that the course of disease in general is affected by emotional distress. It is my sincere hope that we can widen the quest to include the distinct possibility that within one's mind is a power capable of exerting forces which can either enhance or inhibit the progress of the disease. Cancer. What's he telling you? He's telling you that your mind has the ability to control your biology to such an extent that with your mind, you can fight cancer. With your mind, you can fight cancer. Let that settle in for a moment. Page 70 of the same book starts like this. In her address before the Mind Control Group, Mrs. Simonton spoke of the many stresses in life which, if not handled properly, can lead to illness. Quote, "It is so uncommon in our patients for them to have a good marriage," she said. "When there's a good marriage with a cancer patient, it's one of the greatest things we have to work with, one of the greatest reasons for them to stay alive." Now, this book goes on to talk about some incredible impacts with things like visualization. She says if you can imagine visually the cancer cell, most people would describe it as a horrific, disastrous, destructive little cell. But unless you know what you're looking for under a regular microscope, you probably wouldn't recognize it any different than, say, the bacteria that gets into your finger when you get an open wound or a cut. It's blood cells doing what blood cells do. But the cancer cell tends to eat things up. She said if we can visualize the healing rather than the cancer cell, we see dramatic impact in the human body. Now, how many of you as leaders have done vision exercises with your team? You've taken the time to sit down and think about what is your business and what will your business do in the next 5 years and what will your business do in the next 10 years and whose lives will you impact? Remember, the core questions about any leadership opportunity to help is who do you help and how? What do you do and who do you do it for? Same questions, pointed from a different direction, but the real answer comes back to the vision. How do you see yourself helping others moving forward? And if you help others overcome a problem that they find to be a dramatic problem, they will pay you to do that. If your visualization, though, doesn't see you helping others, it just sees you getting rich, it doesn't see you making the world a better place, it just sees you making your world better, chances are that vision is very short-sighted. And so will be the results. If you've got a vision in your life and you can articulate that, it's because you've cleared your mind and focused on the things of the future. You're not thinking about what was. You're not even thinking about what is. You're thinking about what is to come. In my work as a story power coach, I focus on helping people tell stories that recognize the past, but they don't live there. They tell stories that I acknowledge my credibility because I've been through that thing. I've lived there, but I didn't stay there. I walked away from there. I changed my mind. I went a different way. I did a different thing, and my life is evidence that you can do the same. If you change your thoughts, you change your habits, change your patterns, your lifestyle, your life can change as well. But it all starts with the mind. It doesn't matter if you're talking about a relationship mindset or you're talking about your money mindset or you're talking about your business mindset. If you change your mind, your life will change. Also understand, though, Dr. Caroline Leaf says it, Dr. Daniel Amen says it, Bruce Lipton says it, you can think your way into an illness that your body has never experienced before. In fact, Caroline Leaf goes so far as to say that 72 to 98% of all chronic illness in the human body is the direct result of toxic thinking. The direct result of toxic thinking. What is that? Well, it's when the mind is stuck on a trauma from the past and can't let it go. When you keep rethinking the thing over and over again. I mentioned in a previous episode the reticular activating system. When someone has hurt you and you keep rehearsing that in your mind, the reticular activating system doesn't know if that's past, present, or future. So all the biochemistry in the body, it's acting like it's happening right now. Your body's stressing out, your body's freaking out, your body is overwhelmed with these various hormones that are flooding your muscle tissues and your heart and your brain. And your body is living in a trauma that isn't going on. All of those things can lead to chronic diseases like cancer. And if your thinking isn't clear, it can happen to you. One final note on that. I hate for it to be true, but it is. There are people who financially benefit from you being diseased. There are people who sell a whole lot more medication if you're sick. And as much as we hate to think that someone could mess with the way that we think, they do. Music, movies, headlines, social media. If you think that the way you think isn't being impacted by artificial intelligence and the number of bots that are running social media accounts that have no human attached to them at all, you're living with your head in the sand. I remember this basic idiom of marketing. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. True story. You can make him awful thirsty along the way. Creating a demand for something that you don't want right now, that's been the way of marketing for centuries. If I can create a demand in you, if I can make you think in a way that makes your body ill and also make you think I have the cure for your illness, I profit from your negative thoughts. That's like the beer peanuts at the end of the bar that are a little bit spicy, so you'll want more to drink while you're sitting at the bar. It's not hard stuff, but that same paradigm is affecting the way people think, the conversations we have. The thinking that leads you to be diseased is a profit margin marketing tool for someone. Let me go one step further with that. This is my final thought. In this book, they talk about the relationship between relationships and health. In fact, they talk about the relationship of the marriage. You just heard me read that from page 70. She said, when a cancer patient has a healthy marriage, the intimacy of that marriage is the greatest tool we have for fighting the effects of cancer. The intimacy in that marriage is the greatest tool we have for fighting the cancer. Goes on in the next couple of paragraphs to talk about how that intimate relationship doesn't have to be the what goes on behind closed doors kind of intimacy. It's the connected humanness of the relationship. In fact, they talk about how the people who've gone through the control your mind method in a classroom setting, as they all begin to graduate from that classroom setting, because they've spent time talking about their deepest, darkest fears and the things going on in their mind, because they've spent time meditating together, they have a level of intimacy. Now, I've been a part of some online classes where at the end we just feel like the people even in the Zoom room that I was in have a bond, have a relationship. Some have continued to stay in contact with each other in other forms of small group because of the conversation that took place. Imagine the impact that could be had in the marketing and profitability of a company that benefits from the stress medications, the cancer medications, the diabetic medications. If they can break down the community of humanness around the world. Divide and conquer has a whole lot more meanings, but if I can simply get myself inside the way you think about your neighbor, if I can break down the friendships that you have, if I can make you feel ill about someone else, those thoughts, that's profitable. I don't have to control every thought you have, just the ones that make you unhealthy. That becomes profitable. I hate to bring up such a heavy subject, but as leaders, your primary role is influence. And the primary thing you should be influencing is the narrative, because the narrative impacts the way people think, which impacts their productivity, their health, and their success. You're a leader. Step up, lead the narrative, and influence people's thoughts, their health, and their success. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, or Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Loren will serve you well.
Thank you.